Two phrasal verbs, fork out and splash out. Now, both of these phrasal verbs have the same basic meaning, which is to spend a lot of money on something. But one of the phrasal verbs has a more positive connotation and the other has a more negative connotation. Do you know which is which? Or perhaps you can work it out. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again and welcome to any new viewers. This is To The Point English with Ben. I'm Ben, and in this video I'm going to teach you 5 very advanced phrasal verbs. Now these phrasal verbs in themselves are very useful, but more importantly in this video I'm going to explain how you can sometimes infer the meaning or work out the meaning of a phrasal verb from the verb and the particle, even though sometimes they seem to be completely illogical. So let's start with those two phrasal verbs I've just mentioned. So fork out and splash out. Which one do you think is negative and which one do you think is more positive? Well, let's look at the components of the phrasal verb. So fork out obviously contains the word fork, which is usually used as a noun. This is a fork, of course. Whereas splash out contains the word splash, which can be a noun or a verb. But even if you've never seen or heard of these phrasal verbs before, I think it's possible to work out the meaning, usually from the context. Obviously we're seeing them here out of context, although I'm going to give some examples in a moment. But even without the context, it's possible. So let's think about the first one, to fork out. Fork, as I said, this is a piece of cutlery, a utensil we use to eat our meals. But it can also be a garden fork. So a fork which is used to turn over earth, right, or to dig. And that implies some kind of resistance, right? If you have to dig, it's quite hard and you have to make an effort. So do you think that's positive if you fork out for something, if you spend money on something and there's some kind of resistance, some kind of an effort? Probably not, right? So fork out is the phrasal verb with a negative meaning, and it means to spend a lot of money on something unwillingly or reluctantly. So I'll give you a couple of examples before we look at splash out. Every year, parents have to fork out for school uniforms and books. So in this example, we're talking about parents who have children at school, at secondary school, and they have to spend all this money that perhaps they don't want to spend money on, right? They prefer to spend money on holidays or nice things, but they have to spend money, they have to fork out money, so spend money reluctantly or unwillingly on school uniforms and books. Another example, I've been invited to a wedding this summer, so I have to fork out on a new suit. Maybe I want to go to the wedding, but a consequence of that is that I have to spend a lot of money on a new suit, and maybe I'm not so happy about that. So I have to fork out on a new suit. I have to spend a lot of money. Okay, let's move on to splash out now. So that's the phrasal verb with a more positive meaning, a more positive connotation. So you can imagine if you're splashing money around, if you splash out money like water, obviously we splash water around, it's spending it more frivolously, without resistance. It's more fun. So if we splash out on something, that means to spend a lot of money on something extravagantly, especially on luxury items or goods. Okay, so a couple of examples. Come on, it's your birthday. Let's splash out on a special meal at that fancy restaurant. So it's your birthday, so let's splash out, let's spend a little bit more money than we usually would, but on something positive, something we want to spend money on. So it's that a special meal at that fancy restaurant, so a more expensive restaurant than maybe you would normally go to. One more example with splash out. Sometimes I feel like treating myself and splashing out on new clothes. So treating myself, so that's good. I'm giving myself a little present here. So I like to splash out on new clothes. So again, it's perhaps something I don't really need, but it's a little bit extravagant and maybe more expensive clothes than I would usually buy. But it's because I want to treat myself. It's a bit special. So as you can see, it is possible sometimes with some phrasal verbs to work out the meaning from the components of the phrasal verb. So we have the verb and the particle. And as I said, context is also very important. So we're going to look at 3 more very advanced phrasal verbs now. And again, you can work out the meaning of these phrasal verbs from the component parts. So gloss over, to gloss over. What do you think gloss over means? Have you heard the verb gloss in any other situations? You probably have. For example, paint. You have gloss paint and matte paint. So gloss paint is more shiny. And also we have lip gloss, which you can put over your lips to make them shinier. And glossy hair, for example, is shiny hair, looks very healthy. So these shiny superficial things, like paint is superficial, right? It goes on a surface to cover up the old paint. A lip gloss covers lips. So again, this is all relevant to the meaning of gloss over as a phrasal verb, but also the particle over. You know, what does that mean? That, again, it goes over something. So this time, before I give you the definition, I'm going to give you an example sentence, and perhaps you can work out the meaning from the context, but also the real meaning of gloss. The politician tried to gloss over the recent expenses scandal in his party. So in this case, the politician is saying something, right? Maybe he's giving a speech or it's contributing to a debate, but he's glossing over the recent expenses scandal. So this scandal is something very negative. And if you imagine painting over the scandal, covering up the scandal, or putting lip gloss on the scandal. So the meaning of to gloss over is to treat a problem, an error, or an embarrassing situation with less importance than it perhaps deserves. Okay, so again, I didn't expect you to guess the literal dictionary definition of gloss over, but hopefully you could get the general idea of it, which is usually enough. In 99% of the situations, you don't need to know the dictionary definition, you just need to get a general idea if it's negative, positive, and what the idea is from the context and from the meaning of the composite parts of the phrasal verb. So one more example with gloss over. Don't gloss over the real problem, which is your lack of preparation. So in this case, we're talking about someone who has failed an exam, and maybe they're giving all kinds of excuses that maybe they didn't know the topic, or they couldn't hear the audio in the listening paper. But the person they're speaking to responds by saying, oh, come on, don't gloss over the real problem. So don't treat the real problem with less importance. And the real problem is that you didn't prepare, is your lack of preparation. Okay, the next phrasal verb is dwell on. Dwell on. Are you familiar with this phrasal verb? Again, perhaps from the meaning, the literal meaning of the composite parts, so dwell, the verb to dwell. Have you heard of that before? Maybe you've heard of a dwelling. A dwelling. Now, a dwelling is another name for a house. So to dwell is quite a formal alternative to live. So it's to stay in one place for a long period of time. So again, I'll give you an example sentence with dwell on, and perhaps the context can help you guess the meaning. We shouldn't dwell on mistakes made in the past. Let's move on. So we shouldn't dwell on mistakes made in the past. Let's move on. So what do you think the meaning of dwell on is? I think probably from the context you've got it, right? So it means to spend too much time thinking or talking about something negative or unpleasant. In some ways, it's kind of like the opposite of gloss over, right? If you gloss over something, you don't spend enough time talking about something unpleasant. If you dwell on something, you spend too much time thinking or talking about something unpleasant. The football team mustn't dwell on defeat, but look ahead to the next match. So the football team mustn't spend too much time thinking or talking about defeat. They lost the match, but they should look ahead to the next match, so be positive and not spend too much time. So as I said, to dwell can mean to live or to stay in one place for a long period of time. That's the literal meaning of to dwell. But in this case, it's more figurative. It's about thinking or speaking about something negative. Okay, the next phrasal verb is to wise up. To wise up. Again, the component parts will help you to guess the meaning or to infer the meaning of this phrasal verb. Wise, I guess you know, as an adjective, to be wise, it's to be intelligent or knowledgeable about things in general, about life. And in this case, the particle can help. Up, right? That's a direction to go up, usually positive. If things are going up, it's usually positive. So again, I'll give you an example sentence before I give you the definition. It's time to wise up to the fact that you need to prepare for the exam. So here I'm talking to someone who has maybe an English exam, maybe a Cambridge English exam in the future, and they're not really taking it seriously, or maybe they don't understand that they need to be prepared. So I'm saying it's time to wise up. Okay, have you got the meaning? Well, it's to understand or become more aware of something. So one more example, we all need to wise up to the effects our actions have on the environment. Okay, so we all need to wise up, talking about everybody in society, in the world. We all need to wise up to the effects our actions have on the environment. Okay, so as I said, those 5 phrasal verbs are extremely useful. They're very advanced, but you can use them mostly in your speaking. Dwell on and gloss over could potentially be used in some writing tasks, not the extremely formal ones though. Okay, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you very soon for another video. Bye.